Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar. The topic of this session is Attachment of Earnings Orders, or AEOs. My name is Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and today we are joined by my colleague Sarah, who's standing by in the background, ready and waiting to answer any of your questions. Let's now take a look at what we'll cover in today's webinar. So we're going to start with an introduction to attachment orders, outlining the main types of attachment and the different types that can be set up in Sage 50 Payroll. We're then going to discuss working out how much to deduct for an attachment order. And this could be a specific value noted on the order, known as a normal deduction rate, or a calculated amount based on banded earnings and tables. And I'll show you that the tables are built in to Payroll, so it'll do that calculation for you. We'll then give you some demos on how to set up and assign attachments to an employee. So looking at the various settings and how to view that information within the employee record. And we'll finish with processing the attachments. So you'll get to see how the amount is deducted, where you can view this in the enter payment screen, and we'll work through a couple of the calculations just to show you how it's all been calculated. So that's what we've got lined up for you, and we'll get started by running through the main attachment types. Now, within your payroll software, there are actually 17 different types of attachment you can choose from, and it is important that you use the correct attachment type for the order that you've received. To try and simplify this a little, I have kind of condensed these into 5 broad categories of the different attachment types that exist. So starting with debt deduction attachments, which could be marked either as priority or non-priority attachments. So these could be for fines, maintenance, or civil debts. And when you have a debt deduction attachment, you would use attachment type 1, 4, or 12 within the list in Payroll, with attachment type 1 being a priority order where you're given a specific amount to deduct. Number 4 being a non-priority order, and number 12 being a fine that's being repaid where the amount is calculated using tables. And we're going to take a look at some examples of these later on in the demo. The next category of attachment to mention is child maintenance. So there are 2 types of attachment you can set up in Payroll for this. There's reference number 2, which is for traditional child support attachments, where you were given both a normal deduction rate, so an amount to deduct each period, as well as a specific protected earnings amount. And we'll talk more about protected earnings a little bit later on. And there is reference number 14, which is labeled Child Support 2012. And this is for more recent child support orders, where the protected earnings are calculated as a proportion of the taxable pay. So if you're told that the protected earnings is 60% of your employee's pay after tax and national insurance, you would need to use attachment type 12 for that type of order. Or if you're told there's a specific protected earnings amount, you would use number 2. The next category is in relation to local taxes. So the community charge and council tax attachment types are references 5, 6, 7, and 17, with 17 being used specifically for Welsh council tax. Now, community charge, if you don't know, is a reference to the old poll tax from the 1990s. So we wouldn't expect there to be many, if any, of those orders still in circulation. And of course, council tax debt can be deducted as an attachment order. And for that, you would use reference number 7. If the order's been issued in Scotland, it's known as an earnings arrestment. So there are 3 types of attachment that could be used for that. The main one would be earnings arrest, reference number 8. There's a current maintenance arrest if it's for maintenance, or if orders have been combined, you may get a conjoined arrestment order. So one of those reference would be suitable for Scottish earnings arrestments. And the most recent attachment type that was brought in is for benefit debt deductions. So these are direct earnings attachments, or DEAs. They're either deducted at a normal rate or a higher rate, and this will be specified on the attachment order you receive. And for those you would use categories 15 or 16 within Sage 50 Payroll. And we'll be taking a look at those attachments types when we go into the demonstration. Now, when you do receive an attachment, you will need to work out how much you need to deduct from your employee's pay, and you'll be instructed to do this in one of two ways. So you may be asked to deduct a specific amount each period, known as a normal deduction rate, or NDR for short. So that tells you exactly how much you should deduct from your employee's pay each period. And it will usually also come with a protected earnings amount. So either a specific amount of protected earnings, which is an amount that you must not reduce your pay under, your employee's take-home pay under, or in the case of child support, it might be a protected earnings proportion of 60%. You are also allowed to deduct an admin fee for your own costs. So you can deduct £1 per attachment towards your costs. It is deducted from the employee, and that is entirely optional. So it's up to you whether or not you take that fee from your employee. So on the screenshot there, we've got an example of an attachment of earnings order which states a specified normal deduction rate and a protected earnings level. The other way that you might calculate the deduction is by using tables. So the tables will accompany the paperwork that you receive with the attachment order, typically used for council tax, fines enforcement, Scottish arrestment orders. And the good news is that all of these tables are actually built in to the legislation settings in Payroll. So you will be able to automatically calculate the amount that should be deducted based on how much your employee is earning that period. And you'll be able to view these tables within your software as well. So I want to give you a quick look at where you can find the attachment of earnings tables. So we'll just jump over to my desktop. And you can see I'm already logged into Payroll. So if I navigate to the company tasks here on the left-hand side, and then select the legislation option here in the list of tasks, you'll find there's an AEO rates tab. And from here, it will give a list of the 17 attachment types. And for those that use tables, for example, council tax, it will then show you weekly and monthly deduction rates that will be calculated based on your employee's attachable pay. So attachable earnings are the earnings after deduction of tax and national insurance. Now, the rates do change over the years. For council tax, they haven't really been updated since 2007, with the exception of Welsh council tax. But to give you an example, if your employee is paid monthly and their monthly pay after the deduction of tax and national insurance is, say, £1,300, they would fall into this band here, which would instruct you to deduct 12% of that attachable pay. Now, as you can also see from the note at the bottom, with this particular attachment type, if the attachable pay exceeds the highest value in the table, so for monthly £2,020, it actually deducts 50% of the excess and then 17% of the earnings up to 2020. And we'll take a look at that again as part of the demonstrations. So if you've received a set of tables with the attachment order and you're not entirely sure what attachment type you should be choosing, you could always check the AEO rates in your legislation. So for example, there's one for fines enforcement as well. And that should give you a clue as to kind of which attachment type you should be choosing. So these are just for reference. They're used in the automatic calculation of certain attachment types. So we've talked about attachable pay, and it will be useful just to confirm what types of earnings would count as attachable pay. So as you can see on this table, pretty much most normal earnings that you would pay to your employee through payroll are included. So that would be wages and salary, including bonuses and overtime, holiday pay and other pay advances, pension and statutory sick pay. But items that are not included in taxable pay are pretty much the other statutory payments. So sick pay is included, maternity, paternity or adoption pay and statutory redundancy pay should not be included in attachable pay. And as part of your pay element settings, you can define which of your payments form attachable earnings and which perhaps do not. So we'll have a quick look. We'll look at the pay element settings in the next section, but there are some checkboxes to determine which payments are included in attachable pay. And you can read more about this in our knowledge base article that I've linked to in the handout. So that's just a brief introduction to attachment orders and how the amounts are calculated. We're now going to move on to the practical side of things, and we'll explain how to set up and assign attachments to your employees. So in terms of setup, most of this is done for you, but there is a bit of configuration that you can do optionally. So within the company pay element settings, you will find on the attachment of earnings orders tab, the list of 17 attachment types. They all have a standard description that we've pre-programmed, but you can add your own replacement description if you want to use a slightly different label on your employees' pay slips and on what you see within Enter Payments. You could also, at company level, choose whether or not to deduct an admin fee for each attachment type. So that's all found within the company pay elements, and those settings will apply across the board to that type of attachment. The other thing you might want to review are your pay element settings to check which ones are subject to attachment orders. As I say, as a general rule, anything that you'd class as wages, including overtime and bonuses, would be attachable. And you can see the 3 settings within the pay element settings for community charge, council tax, and other attachments is where you would include them or exclude them from attachable pay. So we're going to take a look at the pay element settings, and then we're going to go ahead and assign some of these attachments to our employees so that you can start to see some of this in action. So just going back to our demo now. As I'm already on the company tasks, the first thing we'll have a look at is the pay elements here on the left-hand side. I've then got my attachment of earnings orders tab. And you can see here I've got the 17 attachment types, all with their standard descriptions. And if I want to, entirely optional, I can enter a replacement description. So for these priority and non-priority orders, the 1971 refers to an act of Parliament, might not be particularly useful for your employees. So what I'm going to do in this example is I'm just going to change the description to be priority AEO, and for number 4, non-priority AEO. And that will replace the standard description in this example. You can see as well we have the admin fee column. So if you do want to deduct an admin fee for any of these attachment types, you would set this column to yes. And just as an example, I'm going to charge an admin fee for council tax. So I'm going to set the admin fee to yes, which means I will deduct £1 towards my costs of administering that attachment order. So I'm not going to make any other changes at this point. I'm just going to click OK, which will save those changes that I just made. And if I just jump back into the pay elements, just to show you the pay element settings, where I can control which payments are included in attachable pay. If I just edit this overtime payment, you can see on the right-hand side, we've got the boxes for community charge, council tax, and other attachments. We've got all of these ticked as overtime will count towards attachable pay. I've got the same setting for my commission payments. So I've got the boxes ticked. But I also have a non-taxable expenses payment, which doesn't form part of attachable pay. This is just when I reimburse expenses, and I have not ticked the boxes for that particular payment. So expenses wouldn't be included in any calculations. Now, quick tip for you when it comes to pay element settings, and you may have heard this if you've been on some of our other webinars, but there is a report you can run that summarizes the pay element settings for all of your payments that you have set up. And to view that, you would go into the reports option, and you would find the payment types report. So that lives in the company folder. If you scroll down, we've got one called payment types. And this gives you a really handy way of reviewing pay element settings without having to go into each one individually. And the settings for attachments are these three columns here: community charge, council tax, and other attachments. And that also confirms to me that the first two payments are attachable, expenses is not. So that has set up the pay elements. As I say, most of that is done for you. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to assign some of these to our employees. So I'm going to try and pick out some of the more common attachment types, starting with employee number 1. So for this employee, we've received an attachment order for council tax, which came with a set of tables telling me how to calculate the deduction. To assign this to the employee, I go to the Employment tab within the employee record, and then down to Pay Elements. I would then select the Attachment of Earnings Orders tab, and then from here, I can add any relevant attachments. So they don't have any current attachments, so I'm going to open the list using the drop down. So we can see the list of the 17 attachment types, along with my replacement descriptions for some of them as well. And for this particular one, I know it's for council tax. It's not Welsh council tax. This one's in England. So I'm going to choose council tax from the list. It will automatically set the priority order. So this will be priority order 1, as there is only one attachment. And then I've got columns where I could fill in normal deduction rate, protected earnings, and total attachment. Now, because this one uses tables to calculate the deduction, I can't actually enter anything into normal rate or protected earnings, because the normal deduction rate is going to be calculated for us, and it'll be a percentage based on how much the employee is earning. So the only value that I can enter is the total attachment, which in this example, £5,500, the order issue date, and then I can pop in a reference if I've been given one by the authority that issued the attachment. Now, because we chose the council tax option, you can see that the box at the bottom has been ticked automatically. So you can use tables for community charge, council tax, earnings arrestments, fines enforcements, and direct earnings attachments. So make sure that's ticked. And then to save the pay elements, go ahead and click Save. So that is now assigned to my first employee. Now I'm going to assign a couple of others as well. So for my next employee, I've received a child support attachment. Now that has given me a normal deduction rate that I need to be deducting each month. And it has told me that the employee's protected earnings is 60% of their pay. So for this one, because it's a protected earnings percent rather than a specific amount, I'm going to need to choose the Child Support 2012 attachment type. So when I go into Pay Elements, and then to Attachment of Earnings Orders, I'm not going to choose Reference 2 because that's where I enter my own protected earnings amount. Instead, I'm going to choose Child Support 2012. I can enter the normal deduction rate. So I've been told to deduct £240 each month. I can't enter protected earnings because the protected earnings will be calculated for me, 60% of the employee's attachable pay. And with child maintenance, it tends to be an ongoing attachment. So you wouldn't usually see a total attachment amount. You would leave that at 0. And then when you're told to stop making the deduction, you can simply pop in an order end date. So we'll put our order issue date in. And for child support, you need to enter an order reference, which will be a 12-digit number. And we've got our normal deduction rate entered. Like I say, we've left the total attachment in this case at 0. Let's do one more. So for employee 3, we've received a debt deduction order. It doesn't mention that it's a priority order, so we need to assume that it's non-priority. And we've been given, again, a normal deduction rate, and this time we have been given a protected earnings amount. So going back to my pay elements, attachment of earnings orders, this time I'm going to choose reference 4, so non-priority AEO, could be a civil debt, something like that. And this time our normal deduction rate on the order was £150. The protected earnings was specified as £1,000, and the total attachment for this one was 3,000. So again, we can enter any references that we might have been given. So that is how you would assign and enter either the normal deduction rate or tick the box to use the tables. And we're now ready to process these attachments in our next pay run. So let's just catch up with where we are. Quick recap. So within the pay element settings, you've got the option of selecting whether to deduct an admin fee and also entering a replacement description for your reports and pay slips. And then you can review which payments are subject to attachments by reviewing the 3 checkboxes highlighted there in the pay element settings. What you would then do to assign an attachment is go into the pay elements area in the employee record and onto the attachment of earnings orders tab. Start by choosing the correct attachment type for what you need to deduct. And then it's a case of entering normal deduction rate, protected earnings, if applicable, total attachment, and the order issued date. And remember, for those attachment types that use tables, just make sure that the box has been ticked to use the tables for those types of attachment. So next up, we're going to complete the picture by processing these attachment orders. So I'm going to run a couple of pay runs. I'll also take you through some of the calculations that have been done in the software. So let's just jump back to the demo now. I'm going to go to my payroll tasks. I'm going to set my next pay date. It's going to be the 31st of August. And we'll go ahead and jump into enter payments. So this is my first employee. So we've got their salary and some commission entered for this period. If I select the attachments tab, you can see the council tax attachment appears here. And what it's showing me is the attach value, which has been calculated automatically. So I can't click on that, I can't overwrite it. That's been calculated by the tables. I've got a £1 admin fee being deducted as I've set that up for this attachment type. And then it shows me the calculated attachable earnings. So this is the pay after tax and national insurance, and also the amount deducted. Now, to give you a breakdown of how that was all calculated, this one uses tables. It's a monthly paid employee. Their attachable pay, this 2201, was their gross earnings in this case, 2650, minus their tax and national insurance. So that's how we've got the attachable pay. And because these earnings are higher than the highest band, so 2020 was the upper limit of the 17% band for council tax. Anything above that 2020 limit, we take 50% of. So what the program has done there is it's worked out how much pay is above £2,020, and it's worked out 50% of that. Now, for the rest of the attachment, so the attachable earnings up to 2020, 17% is deducted according to the tables. And if we add that to the 50% of the excess, that's how you get your 43412. You don't need to worry about doing that calculation yourself. I guess it would only be if an employee queries it. The program has done that now in accordance with the tables. So that is then deducted from our employee in addition to the £1 admin fee. Now, moving on to my next employee. This was the employee with the child support attachment. So currently we've got their monthly salary entered of £2,000. And checking the attachments tab, we've got child support 2012, and you can see this time the attached value, the normal deduction rate, is editable. So I can overwrite this if I need to, if there's been a change to the normal deduction rate. We're not charging an admin fee for this one, and we've got the attachable earnings. Now, the protected earnings for this one is 60% of the attachable pay. So that's the minimum. You can't reduce the employee's pay below that protected amount. But the amount deducted in this case is the full £240. Now, I just want to show you what would happen if the employee's pay is reduced for any reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to record some sickness for this employee. So they've been off sick for most of the month of August. I'm going to pop some SSP in, and I'm actually going to reduce the employee's salary down to 0. Now, statutory sick pay is still attachable, but you can see now, because I've reduced the employee's earnings, the amount deducted is less than the attachment value, the normal deduction rate. And the reason for this is that it would take them below their protected earnings. So to show you how that was calculated, employees' gross pay in this case is just £369.75. They don't have any tax or national insurance to deduct, so that is their attachable earnings, as can be seen here. And if we take 60% of that, the protected earnings level is 221.85. And you can see that's what the employee's net pay is. And as such, the child support deduction has been reduced. Now, it does mean that there's an amount carried forward. So £92.10 couldn't be deducted this period. So that will be added on to future deductions whenever protected earnings allow. So that's why an amount of £147.90 is being deducted rather than the full £240, because we've got reduced pay. And then just on to our last employee. So they had a non-priority deduction with a fixed amount and protected earnings. We've got their full salary entered currently, £2,500. The attachment value is £150 per month. That's what we entered. Attachable pay, so gross less tax and national insurance and salary sacrifice in this case, is just over £2,000. So that means that we can deduct the full £150, as the protected earnings that we entered for this one was £1,000. Now, again, I do want to show you what would happen if there was reduced pay. So I'm actually going to knock the pay down to just above £1,000, so 1,125. And looking at the attachment now, we can see the amount deducted has gone down. The employee's net pay is actually sitting at the protected earnings. And the reason that we can only take £77.24 is because of the protected earnings that we've entered. But the difference with this one compared to child support, which is a priority order, is that there's no amount carried forward. So if it's non-priority, you don't carry forward, but the protected earnings still apply. If it's a priority order, amounts do carry forward, and they can then be deducted in future pay periods. So those are the 3 employees with the attachment orders. Just want to show you a couple of useful reports for this one. So if I go into my pre-update reports, first of all, I'll show you what it looks like on a pay slip. So just one of our standard pay slip layouts here. So we've got a child support, so we've got a council tax attachment. And for this one, we have charged an admin fee. So those are both deductions from the employee's pay. This one was the child support one. And then this third one was the non-priority AEO. So it's used that replacement description, as you can see on the attachment. So that's what it looks like on a pay slip. But useful report for your records would be the attachment of earnings report, which is actually found in the summary folder. So I've added it to my favorites for this demo. It's just here towards the top of the summary. And this actually gives you some useful information on how the deduction has been calculated. So we can see what was attachable, whether there's any protected earnings. And you can see for ones where there is amounts carried forward, it's documenting that as well. So it gives a good sort of explanation of how the amount deducted has been worked out. So I'm just going to go ahead and update records for this period. And then I'm just going to jump ahead to my next pay date, just to finish off this demo. So on the next pay date, first employee, still getting their usual salary. They've got the same commission this month. So looking at their attachments, still got an amount deducted. This attachment will stop automatically once the total attachment has been paid off. Same amount as last month because the earnings haven't changed. Next employee, let's say they're back to work. So they're not off sick this month, got them on full pay. Looking at the attachments, attached value is 240. That's the normal deduction rate. But can you see the amount deducted is actually adding on that 90 odd pounds that was carried forward? So it's clawing back what should have been deducted last month when the earnings were lower. Obviously, it's still protected earnings level is 60% of this attachable pay. And then this last one, the non-priority AEO, let's pop them back up to full pay as well. It's taken the full amount, but the difference here is it's not carrying forward what wasn't deducted last period, and that's because it's a non-priority order. Now, last thing I just want to show you, a quick tip. If you do have employees that have more than one attachment order, there is a certain priority, or some take priority over others. So sometimes it might be necessary for you to adjust the priority numbers. So at the moment, this employee has a non-priority AEO, but let's say this month, we've just received a council tax attachment for them as well. So I'm just going to jump into the add attachment screen. If I selected council tax from this list, you can see by default, it is putting it as priority order 2. Now the problem there, if we just leave it like that, and we have ticked the box to use the tables, is that if it's priority order 2, it's calculating this attachment after it's taken the previous attachment. But what it should be doing is it should be taking the council tax first. So the attachable pay would be higher, and therefore there would be a higher amount deducted for it. So if I need to swap these priorities, so council tax comes out first, if you've got more than one, here's how you do it. So first of all, the one that is currently order number 1, set it to 0. Then we can change our council tax to 1. And then we can put the non-priority to 2. So once I've made those changes here, that swaps them round. And now we have got the correct amount of council tax deducted before the lower priority attachment of earnings order. So just a bit of a tip there if you do need to swap the priorities around. So that's pretty much the end of the demo, but just to recap that final section for you. So this is what we looked at in the Enter Payments screen. So you go onto the Attachments tab. You will either see the normal deduction rate that you entered, and that is editable if it uses a normal deduction rate, or it will show the calculated attachment value from the tables. There'll be an admin fee if you've chosen to deduct one of £1. The attachable earnings is the pay that remains after PAYE, national insurance, and any higher priority attachments. Amount deducted, self-explanatory, the amount that's deducted for that attachment. And then where applicable, you've got any amounts carried forward due to protected earnings. So that would apply to priority orders only. And you can read more about what you see in that tab following the link on your handout. So that has brought us to the end of what we're going to cover in today's webinar. We are going to stick around though, just to make sure that we have answered all of your questions. And before we do that, I will run through some of the further support that's available and our upcoming webinars this month. So a couple of other sessions coming up this week: online payslips and P60s and variance reporting. And then later in the month, we've got starters, leavers, a guide to HMRC submissions, report favourites and selections, and payroll assistant. So if you'd like to come along to any of those sessions, completely free to attend, just head to our website, sage.co.uk/webinars, and follow the links for Sage 50 Payroll. You can also find further support on our help centre. Simply click any help icon in Sage in your payroll, or in a browser you can go to sage.co.uk/help. This is also where you'll find the details to get in touch with our support team. And I also want to mention a brand new course that we've launched in Sage University. It's our Sage AI Academy. Again, this is a completely free bite-sized course where you can complete a 10-minute lesson each day over 30 days to learn more about AI in general. So completely free, open to everyone. It's not product specific. So this is using AI in general. So saving time on your admin, getting you confident and safe AI use. So on your handout, you can click to find out more. So we're going to stick around just to ensure that we've answered the questions. If you do want a copy of the handout, make sure you download that before you leave us today. I'm going to pop onto mute briefly just to help Sarah out with any remaining questions, and I will be back with you before we close the session down. So I will speak to you shortly. Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for sending the questions through. We are now pretty much out of time, but it looks like we have managed to get answers out to most, if not all, of those questions. So hopefully that has helped you out. Last chance before you leave to download the handout if you'd like to take that away with you. And I'd just like to let you know that you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's session. So feel free to re-watch this as many times as you need to, or to share with a colleague. We also host all of our recordings on our website at sage.co.uk/webinars. You'll also be invited to take a survey when you leave the webinar. So very much appreciate knowing your thoughts on today's session. So if you get a chance to complete that, please do. With that said, though, we're going to call it a day there. So thanks again for joining us at the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on some other sessions in the future. But it is goodbye for now.